Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Eastern Kentucky University and to our course on the school superintendency. We've got three guests today who bring leadership perspectives that are not directly tied to public education. And that is because I believe that school leaders can improve their leadership skills by looking outside of public education, looking for ideas, inspiration, and new perspectives. So our guests today are Diogo Costa, who is the president of the Escola Nacional de Administração Pública, which is the National School of Public Administration. As part of the Brazilian Ministry of Economy, Diogo directs the professional development and training for federal employees throughout Brazil. He will bring a governmental and an international perspective on leadership. Leslie Morissette is the founder and executive director of Grahamtastic. When Leslie's 8-year-old son, Graham, died of leukemia, she started Grahamtastic to provide terminally ill children with technology to stay connected with their friends in school. Leslie will speak on leadership that is mission-driven and also from the nonprofit world. Leslie was recognized as one of CNN's heroes in 2017. And our third guest is John Rice, retired vice chairman of General Electric Company. John Rice was the number 2 person in the multinational firm GE. Working under famed chairman Jack Welch and later Jeff Immelt, John has a deep understanding of leadership and education. Residing, at least in part-time, in Atlanta, John was very involved in supporting Atlanta public schools. John will speak about leadership from a business perspective that is driven by financial success, as well as innovation, excellence, and dealing with constant change. So welcome, all of you. Each of you brings a very different perspective on leadership. Leslie, could you start off by telling us about your journey as a leader?
Let's see, my journey as a leader. It's funny that you call me a leader because I really don't consider myself a leader. I suppose I do lead a nonprofit organization. I actually made a huge career shift back in 2006. I was an art director for a greeting card company, and I'm a trained artist, and did Grahamtastic on the side almost as a hobby for years until we grew to the point where I had to switch over to the nonprofit world. And as I switched over, I realized I knew nothing about the nonprofit world. So I had to surround myself with brilliant people, experienced people that could help us build the nonprofit and teach me the big difference between running a nonprofit organization and working for a corporation as a designer, which is a huge difference. So I love my work, and I hope that I am inspiring others to also start programs to change the world and to make the world a better place.
Great, thank you. For those of the students coming on, would you mind muting yourself, and then we'll have time for questions, and then you can unmute later on at that. Gio, what was your leadership journey, and what brought you to this position at a relatively young age?
So my journey encompassed the private sector, the third sector, and now the public sector. So after I finished grad school in New York, I went to DC and I worked at think tanks in DC with the research community there. And that also gave me the opportunity to work with think tank leaders in Brazil. One of the institutions I worked for was the Atlas Network, and they had a series of partner organizations in Portuguese-speaking countries. Brazil, Portugal, but also Angola, Mozambique. And that's when I met some of the folks who joined the Brazilian government in 2019. And then they invited me to make an app, our school, to work more as a think tank, to also produce knowledge and research and innovation services. And in the brief period between those two experiences, I also worked as an assistant professor at a business school in Belo Horizonte, Brazil, IBMEC.
Great, thank you. John, correct me if I'm wrong, but you basically spent your entire career at GE, didn't you? How did being in one organization for all that time, how did that experience shape your leadership practice?
Well, it was one company, but dozens of different businesses. And you work with as you said, I've worked with all the last 4 CEOs of GE. And my view of leadership, and it's not just learning from them, but you learn about leadership from every leader you interact with, and the leaders that work for you and you work with, not just the ones you work for. So my view of leadership is that it comes from all the things that you assimilate over years from your interactions with people, and you're evaluating what works and what doesn't work. And the other thing, you know, is that I think leadership is, these skills are transferable. Nonprofit, for-profit, school systems, the basic form, what constitutes great leadership would, I think, constituted in any one of these disciplines. My wife, Leslie, runs a family nonprofit that we started out of a family tragedy. And I look at the work that she does, and you know, to do really great there, you have to be a great leader. And I think the skills that she demonstrates are similar to the skills I demonstrated.
Do you think then, John, that it's possible for a leader in one sector, one industry, to transfer into another industry? So someone coming from corporate America to come into public education, from the nonprofit into corporate?
Absolutely. I think you have to do it, you have to have a lot of EQ, right? You have to be able to connect with people and understand what you don't know, and listen to the people who know more about it than you. But you look at the former governor that runs Purdue very successfully, right? Never been in education, and he is doing a terrific job. And I think, but it's not just because he's smart and he was the governor, it's because he could navigate within a system that he didn't grow up in. And that takes a level of agility and thoughtfulness and, you know, learning and listening. And I think you can do that in just about any discipline. I don't think you can take me and have me design jet engines. Like, I don't think you would want to fly on those planes, because I'm not an engineer. So there are jobs where that wouldn't work. But I had operating responsibility at one point for the aviation business, and everything worked just fine.
Now, staying with the large corporation, with GE, you've got almost 200,000 employees in almost 200 countries around the world. How do you have the same leadership philosophy and have some continuity across all employees, across all sectors of the business, and still have some continuity of values, messaging, and expectations?
Well, I mean, what constitutes great leadership? You have to be trustworthy. You have to be somebody who does what they say they're going to do and is who they say they are. You have to be somebody who wants to lead a team, not just be an autocrat. And so if you think about the basic tenets of good leadership, they apply everywhere. Now, you do have to respect cultural norms. Japanese leaders are different than Saudi Arabian leaders. And Korean leaders are different than the leaders you might find in Brazil. And so to be successful in that exchange, you have to really appreciate the differences. You can't go into Japan as an American and just do things the way you would do them in America. You have to respect the cultural norms in Japan, but that doesn't mean compromising the basic tenets of good leadership.
Sure. Now, Diogo, you've worked in New York at the think tank there and in Brazil. So you've had one foot in kind of two cultures, at least. And you also were in England as well. How do you have to adapt your leadership depending on the culture and the environment in the country?
Well, there are some things that are common, and I think the development of trust, for instance, is essential in any country. However, the way that you build trust can be very different. In a country, Brazil and maybe Latin America in general, the way that you show empathy is important for you to develop trust, for people to trust you. So right now we're going through a critical step in our institution. We are taking part of our organization and put it in a new kind of governance with a partner from the private sector. And many of our employees are kind of scared about this, right? So they don't, it's a change, how that will change their lives. So in order for you to gain their trust, you have to show that you care about them, that you care about the institution, and not only say that, but actually show with meaningful actions. So this is something that leaders before me for 20 years have been trying to do, and they still haven't managed that. But I think now we're moving forward because of that, because there's that kind of trust. So I think that in the US and in England, trust can come from rules and being more objective about them, and there's a culture of compliance. In Latin America, I think trust and empathy fulfill that kind of role. So I do think that, for instance, one thing that was also important for us to build trust is that we, when we have to be honest about things, we don't try to use paternalistic lies. Now, during this pandemic, we saw many times authorities that in order for people to behave a certain way, they change a little bit about the truth. Sometimes they say that masks don't work, and then they say the masks do work, but they were just saying that because they want to save some for healthcare workers. And then you get mixed messages, and people stop trusting you. So when the pandemic hit, before the pandemic hit, Brazil was hitting China and parts of Europe, we already had a plan for the pandemic in our school, and people thought that if you release a plan without anyone infected in your city, maybe people think that you're overreacting. But it was that kind of honesty and sincerity that when the pandemic actually hit, people were trusting us because we kept on the same message. They saw that we anticipated a problem. So I think to have that kind of honesty, even if you think that at first people might think that you're reacting or that they might not understand fully what your intentions are, but through the long run, I think that builds more trust in the institution and in your leadership as well.
Yeah. Now, one of the challenges that we've had here is the advice that's been given is changes as the science changes, as we discover new things. When you had to share that, those messages, were you able to be consistent, or did you have to change that message? And then did people start to second guess whether you knew what you were talking about?
No, I think even the things that you don't really know that well, if you allow people to understand that there's a part of what you're doing that is based on the best available science, but you're not completely sure, I still think that it works. One thing that changed here was that I think the science changed in relation to how the virus is airborne, right? At the beginning, the focus was on surfaces. Then we changed our resource allocation here, that we hired extra people to clean surfaces. Then we changed that to better ventilation. But I think people are understanding of that. As long as you don't say, you shouldn't care about ventilation at all. We don't know about ventilation, but we think that surface is more important now. So I think if you, even if you change some of your policies, if they come from a place of honesty, even admitting some of your ignorance, I think it still works.
Sure. Okay. Leslie, getting back to the issue of trust, as the leader of a nonprofit, how does trust play into that for you?
Trust is everything, especially in the nonprofit world. We don't have a product to sell. So in order for us to do our job or our mission, we have to rely on the generosity of corporations, individuals, donors. And they have to trust you. If they are either volunteering their time or reaching in their pocket to make a donation, they have to trust that it's going to a good place, that children will be served as they wished, and that you are going to say what you're going to do what you said you're going to do. If there's no trust, nothing exists. And I really think you have to be authentic and appreciative too, and just completely and absolutely transparent. As a nonprofit, you need to be able to have your taxes on, available for anyone to see. You have your board looking after you, making sure that money is being spent in the correct manner and double checking that you're following your bylaws and rules. And if it's not transparent and the public suspects, you might as well be doing something wrong, because it's all about trust. And I do find it really interesting to listen to industries and business being so much like a nonprofit in so many ways. The honesty, the trust, the authenticity, everything is the same, although it's different businesses. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Now, Leslie, as part of your business, your organization, loss and grief are part of it over time. How do your volunteers not suffer from emotional burnout? What do you do to support your volunteers?
Well, right off the bat, when we start onboarding volunteers or board members, we talk about the fact that we probably lose 1 out of 5 cancer patients that we serve. And this work is not for everyone. We understand that completely. So we're very upfront with it. And we let people know that it exists, it happens. We have events, the families come to our events, that they meet the children, they get to know the children, and there is loss. So we have had some people step down or just basically say, we'd like to donate, but we can't be part of this. It's just too hard for us. So it really is preparing. Another onboarding thing that we do with our board members is we always bring them to the hospital when we could go to the hospital to meet the patients, the families, get right on the floor in the trenches with us and see if it is a good match, see if they emotionally can do this or not. And if they don't, if they can't, that's okay. Everyone is different and everybody has a different level of what they can do and what they can't do. And if there is grief, we support each other. We know who's close to who, and we're there to support each other through it. Because unfortunately, as you said, it does happen.
Yeah. Okay. John, what were some of your early mistakes as a leader that you learned an important lesson from?
Well, I don't know where to start, Raymond. I think that in the beginning, there's a ladder and there are titles, and if you get a bigger title, you get a bigger paycheck, you get a bigger office, and there's this thing that you're aspiring to, and you don't even know. In my case, I didn't even know what it was like, but I just knew that if I worked hard, I would, get rewards. About midway through, I started to think about leadership. So this was more than 20 years ago. And I realized that the best leaders I knew were the most influential leaders. They weren't the leaders with the biggest title or the corner office. And I started to think about how important influence was in leading. This is not a command and control game anymore. It's about leading people across an organization and influencing them to a higher level of performance. Not like hitting them in the side of the head. That might have worked in the 70s, but it wasn't working in the 90s, and it doesn't work today. And I realized that it is really about influence. Leading is about influence. Same thing for my wife and our nonprofit. It's about how do you influence people to take on the challenges that you have to take on, to contribute the money that you have to collect, to buy the gas turbine that you want to sell. I think I didn't figure that out until it was too late. I just wish I had known it sooner, and I was preoccupied with this thing that it was aspirational, but it was like ephemeral. I didn't even know what it was. And then I began to realize that I just wanted to do the best job I could do in every job I had. And if that happened, then I'd be okay. And the other thing I want to talk about leadership is change, because it is something that every organization faces. Leslie, you talked about having to take this on full time because it changed and you wanted it to keep changing. So you said, okay, I don't know, maybe you didn't do this, but
I wanted it to grow.
who's going to do the job, right? You got to do the job. And how do you prepare people to change, for teachers, for superintendents, for principals? You can't teach the same stuff next year that you taught last. You can't teach the same way. You have to think about new things, new ways to get to connect with students. If there's a teacher that doesn't want to change, eventually they're not going to be a good teacher. Eventually, if there's a leader, a business leader who doesn't want to change, eventually the clock's going to run out and they're going to end up doing something else. So helping people adapt to what a changing environment is also an enormous part of leadership. Be comfortable. Nobody likes change. I mean, it's uncomfortable. You like to kind of get up and follow your routine. Do you brush your teeth first, or do you wash your face first? Or, how many cups of coffee do you have before you look at your iPad or whatever? You don't want that to be disrupted. But you become comfortable with change. To be a successful leader, you have to become comfortable with change, and you have to help others become comfortable with change, because nothing gets to stay the same.
Now, having said that, Diogo, in the government sector, is it safe to say that most or all of your federal government employees have some type of employment protection, kind of civil service, that makes it very difficult to fire them? Is that safe to say?
Yes, I think that's even an understatement. To say that they are hard.
It's like tenure. It's like tenure.
Exactly. So when you've got either your staff or, how many people do you train? Hundreds or thousands of people a year through your program?
Yes, it's in the hundreds of thousands. Yes, we have so far trained 141,000 public servants.
Wow. And are most of those people voluntarily going through that training, or are they required?
Part voluntarily, part of their careers.
Okay,
so they have to do some of those courses. Yeah.
So I assume just compliance is probably not the goal that we all aspire to. And in government, you don't aspire to have all your employees just complying with the minimum expectations. So as the leader, how do you really inspire people to go above and beyond and to excel when they don't have to?
Well, first, you have to connect the big picture with the small picture, right? You have to show purpose all the time. This is what motivates people, because you cannot. There's very few mechanisms of rewards, as John was saying. We don't have. I mean, we do have some offices here, some corner offices, but the pay grade, sometimes the kind of progress they have in their careers, that's set by norms, by law, by legislation. So a lot of what we do is we have to appeal to the purpose. We have to show what we're doing, how we're improving the life of ordinary citizens, and connect that to the work that people are doing every day, to the work that they're doing in front of the computer, in front of their Excel sheet. But you also have to show how doing that in a more agile way, in a more efficient way matters. And I think during the pandemic, we saw that, right? When you have a virus that's, doubling its reach every week, agility, speed becomes essential. So we produce knowledge here, right? We produce research. We have an academic journal, and And usually the way we do things is that we wait for, all the articles to come, and then we referee them. And after a while, you launch the new issue of our journal. We couldn't wait for that, right? So as as referees went through the articles, we were publishing them online first. Then after a few months, we had the full edition. But those pieces were reaching decision makers. Some of them were about cost and benefits of different social measures. So we want the knowledge to go through. Same thing with when we're doing our processes for research grants. We committed ourselves to do that process in 48 hours. Usually it takes over a month. So everyone was ready. So when the proposals came, we had the team ready, and we went through them in 48 hours, and then we sent the responses to everyone, because we knew that money must reach their hands quickly, because they were working on something whose, the difference of having that knowledge today or a month, 2 months from now means maybe you're going to save or lose many lives. So I think when the pandemic sent us this pressing message that agility matters, that speed matters, this also engaged and motivated employees to do their best and to see that their work today had a meaningful impact in the lives of many people.
Great. Now, Leslie, John didn't start GE and Diogo didn't start the Brazilian government, but you did start your organization, your nonprofit from the ground up. What were some of those early leadership challenges and frustrations and roadblocks that you had to work through?
It's a roadblock, but it's also definitely an asset too. The fact that I came from a completely different career I went to college as an artist. I was trained as an artist. I've always considered myself a creative person. And I had to actually switch over to being more strategic and, more planning and just the other side of the brain altogether. But on the same note, I needed to be creative because I was creating something out of nothing. It didn't exist. So I was starting new programs, and I was starting a new way of, giving out a product, and what turned out into be eventually a nonprofit, a nationwide nonprofit. So it was something I had to learn. I wasn't trained in business. I don't have my MBA. But fortunately, as I said earlier, I was smart enough to know to surround myself with very, very smart people. And what I didn't know, I asked a lot of questions and just tried not to ask too many dumb questions, kind of pedal backwards a few times. And also, seeking mentors is really, really important. And I didn't do that at first. And I stumbled a lot and made a lot of mistakes until I realized there are some people out there that have been doing this a lot longer than I have been. And they have a world of knowledge. And all you have to do is reach out to them and ask them. And they're so happy to share that knowledge with you. So, besides the other roadblocks of not having funding to do what I needed to do, raising money is huge in the nonprofit world unless you come into it with deep pockets. You want to do good, you want to make change, you want to help whatever, part of the population you're helping. But if you don't have money to do it, it's only a dream. You have to have the funds behind it to do it. So as anyone will speak probably in any business, you have to somehow make the money to do the good work. It's unfortunately about that.
Sure. Let me take a pause here. Do any students want to jump in with a question? Do you just want to unmute yourself and ask a question? I'll give you a couple seconds. Otherwise, we'll have other opportunities later on too. Okay, seeing all the mute signs, symbols on, I'll continue. Oh, Chad, do you want to start with a question?
Well, I just had a question. I know, John, you mentioned about early mistakes. How long into it before you realized you made those mistakes? You didn't exactly say that. So what do you think?
Well, the faster you figure it out, the better you are. And I think that, you make
like
mistakes.
I'm making mistakes all the time, just to be
Oh
honest.
yeah, you make mistakes. And I used to, try to fix them before I admitted that they were even mistakes. And that's not necessarily good. I mean, you need to sit down with the team and say, hey, this is a mistake and we got to deal with it. And I got to the point where when I was reviewing businesses, and I could tell, because you're in a business review and you know something's wrong, but team A comes out and says, yep, this is a problem and here's what we're trying to do to fix it. Team B doesn't do that, and you have to ask 5 perfect questions to get to the problem. And I can tell you, team B had a lot rougher go of it than team A, because you want people that will come in and say, hey, I got a problem. This is what I think, or we think we're doing to fix it. And we're open for any good ideas, right? As opposed to team B, where it's kind of, you have to figure out which shell the pea is under. And so you're so much better off acknowledging your mistakes quickly, not pretending that they're going to go away, and just say, okay, life is not about mistake-free performance. Now, what do I need to do to fix this?
Okay, well, thanks. I appreciate that. Because I mean, we all make mistakes, and I guess that's my biggest thing is trying to move forward once those are made. And I'm not talking about major mistakes. I'm just talking about, the small things on a weekly, day-to-day basis and so on.
Even major mistakes, Chad, even major mistakes. I mean, you want people, that's where the trust comes in. If your team trusts you, they'll come in and say, we really screwed this up.
Yeah. Well,
and you want them to.
Let's stick with that. John talked about how you share bad news or mistakes, bad news. Diogo, in your role, how do you share bad news? How do you break bad news to people?
Well, first, I think you always have to own your part in the bad news you're bringing. It's easy sometimes for you to find the blame, to find the scapegoat, blame someone above you, blame someone below you. But to begin with, your part on how this came about, I think the sense of honesty and transparency always matters. And of course, you also have to try to look at the silver lining of everything you're doing. Own up to your mistakes, admit what went wrong, what could be better, but also try to show the good in the bad news. So sometimes it's firing an employee, but then showing them what is a direction that they can take with their career, what are their strengths that maybe weren't being well used in the position they were in. So it's not always easy. And then there is a benefit depending on how your decisions were made, and then when you communicate the bad news. When you build your decisions with a lot of buy-in or collaborative construction, then when things didn't turn out as well, at least you know where they came from, you know how that decision was made, you know that it wasn't a hastily made decision, but it was well constructed. And then I think the understanding is better in those situations.
Leslie, I suppose perhaps the kind of bad news that you have to share is when you have the loss of a child that you've been serving. How do you share that news with your volunteers, with your group, with the organization?
Very delicately, I guess is the answer. There's really not an easy way to deliver that news. I know doctors and nurses are very good at it in preparing before you just say something, even in body language, preparing and delivering a message. And I think if you deliver it with compassion and empathy, it's a little easier to be received. But that's not the only bad news. I mean, I make mistakes too. And I have to answer to a board of directors. And I think the best way to talk about mistakes that were made are just to own it. don't try to push the responsibility off on someone else. If it's your responsibility, own it, apologize, and then learn from it. And I think if you have that type of delivery on it, then people are very forgiving. And generally they come up with really great solutions and ideas in the future on how to avoid that. And I just think that open dialogue and being honest with yourself and others is the way to deliver.
I think all of my students, well, they're all preparing to be superintendents. But I believe from memory, everyone is a current school administrator at some level. In fact, I know that because that's a requirement to get into the program. How does an aspiring leader become a leader? And even, think back to even before they would be a district administrator now or a school administrator, as a teacher, how does someone take actions to get that momentum going, to get that the trajectory going towards becoming a leader? Diogo, how does someone get started? How do you grow into it?
For me, I think it's hard for you to become a leader without followers, without actually people who you persuade. So I think persuasion is usually key. To have people to buy in your idea, your vision, and then you start your own movement somehow. A movement can be organization, can be a public agency, but even in a public agency has to be some kind of movement. So in Brazilian government, sometimes you have institution where all the employees are there, they're tenured there, and then new managers come and go. So you can come and you can be the head of organization and still not be a leader. So for you to actually become one, you have to express your vision. You have to show people exactly where you want to go, and you have to have people buy in that vision. So I think a good leader begins as someone who knows how to use persuasion, and that it's a skill that begins with a vision, begins with a sense of mission, and then you have people to join you. And again, it's a cliche to say this, that you don't simply impose your vision over other people. It has to be something built with them. And there's always a degree of how democratic you want to be, because there is a limit to decision making. If it's involve too many people, there's too many veto points, and things don't get made, and this is very common in government. Francis Fukuyama talks that governments have become sometimes vetocracies. Everyone can say no and no one can say yes, so nothing gets done. So there's a limit to that. But when you have good processes of how you people can join in your vision, can join your mission, then that's, I think, how you become a leader, even if you were already hierarchically superior to them, but still didn't have leadership.
Leslie, same question. How does an aspiring leader become a leader?
I think that leadership is also a personality trait. We've all met children who are strong leaders. Some people might say they're bossy as a 3-year-old, but they have strong leadership skills. They have the other 3-year-olds on the playground lined up behind them to get on the slide. You also have children that are making sure that other schoolmates are not being bullied. They are showing kindness by example, and people are following them, seeing the great results, and also not wanting to be bullied and recognizing things are wrong. So throughout your life, even before you have your job in the leadership role, I think you have to live your life as a leader. And whatever your passion and your mission are, if you're true and kind, I'm going to say kind rather than the word nice, people will join you, because good follows good. And it's a lifelong learning. It's not something you can take college classes and other type classes on leadership, but I really think you have to walk the walk in every aspect of your life if you choose to be a leader. And always re-examine your goals of why you're leading, if you're leading for ego reasons, most likely you will not be a successful leader. The ego has to absolutely stay out, and the cause has to stay, or the business has to stay first in mind without ego.
John, let me put a slightly different twist on the question. GE is famous for the leadership development programs that they operate. What's the secret sauce in those programs?
Well,
Role leaders.
I think, first of all, it starts on day one. So we expect leadership from people who, on their first day, who are interns or co-ops, and then join our management training program. So it's kind of akin to what I said before, in terms of the leadership journey. It doesn't have anything to do with your title or your box, where your box is on the organization chart. I mean, the 3-year-old on the playground gets other 3-year-olds to follow him or her, not because they have a title, but because they have an idea. And they have the ability to communicate and convince people that it's a good idea, so they follow, right? That's what leadership is. And we really did expect our youngest employees, our newest employees, to show leadership, even though they had nobody working for them. Like, that's the point, is when you start, I was 8 or 9 years in the company before I had somebody reporting to me. But that didn't mean I wasn't expected to show leadership. And if I can, I just want to circle back to this point about change, because when I was listening to all of our comments, the word that is so important to start all this off, because it is harder if you have a government system where, there's laws and people have effectively tenure. I'm a trustee at 2 schools and there's tenure there too. But the word is why. When you want people to change, you have to start with why. Like, why do we need to change? And too often, as leaders, we start with what and how, because we want to solve a problem. And so we get in, we have a meeting, we say, okay, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it. And we don't spend enough time on why. And if you want people to change who don't have to change, you got to help them understand why. Leslie's trying to raise money. She's going to people or organizations that probably have to turn down, 4 out of 5 requests just because they can't say yes to everybody. So she's got to show why Grahamtastic is a great investment, right? And why it deserves their consideration. And it's her ability to do that, which is going to help her raise money. But it starts with why, not something else. And in the pace of the day, and if you're in a school system, and many school systems are unionized, some of them aren't, but you still, if you want people to change more effective, it's like your kids. I wish I'd known this when I was raising my boys, because I didn't spend enough time helping them understand why they needed to do the stuff I wanted them to do, right? Eventually we worked it out, but if I knew then what I know now, it probably would have been a lot better for all of us.
Some of the students, do you have more questions?
Okay, this question's for everybody. Sorry, I've just got to ask the question though. Do you think there's a fine line of being just a little bit of a micromanager and actually giving direction or managing? Does that question come across okay? I mean, I guess sometimes my biggest thing is, I make out these daily schedules, weekly schedules, so on. Is there a fine line of trying to manage too closely? Because a lot of employees, when they look to someone, they want advice. They want you to tell them what to do. What's the fine line there that you've had? And that's for everybody, that you kind of think that, okay, I need to back away. Let them be a little creative on their own. Sorry, I might've got too winded on that.
Diogo, do you want to start off with that?
I've been at the same time, I've been accused of a micromanager and also a hands-off manager by people in the same team. So sometimes it puzzles me as well. But one thing that we try to do is that we try to look a lot at the results rather than the processes. So with our team, we have a series of goals and measurements, and we have regular meetings, and we discuss those results. And I try not to focus too much on the details of how you get those results.
So do you
But
get,
there are consequences for people when they get and they don't, and then they'll get them. But yeah, so I think what I've managed to do was to pay a little less attention on processes and more attention on the results.
Chad, did you want to follow up with a question?
well, I was just thinking, I mean, so you do get feedback on that. I mean, you actually ask for that feedback, or do people just generally give it to you? I mean, is that something I need to be requesting more of? Say, hey guys, am I being a little too micromanaging? I'll just use that term. Am I micromanaging? I mean, is that something you need to just kind of put out there and say, guys, do I need? I don't know. I'm kind of got lost there for a second, but you get the gist of it. Is being a micromanager something that somebody would come out and tell you at some point in your career? Have you ever been? I mean, is anybody? I hate to keep dwelling on that, but I just don't want to be the person known as a micromanager, trying to stay up with every single area. I've got like 5 or 6 job titles, and I do a lot of different things. So sometimes staying up with everybody, I don't know. Anyways, so
Maybe as a version of the question, Chad, something, how do you know what are the things that you just need to do as the leader? You just do it as the manager.
yeah, there you go.
And what are the kinds of things that it's important to have people more involved with and sharing that leadership?
Yeah, I got lost in my own train of thought there.
Let me start with a theory. Okay. I don't think that the highest performing teams that I've been around haven't been run by micromanagers. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't need to micromanage. Okay. So the first thing for me, Chad, would be, yes, find out if you're viewed as a micromanager, and then understand why. You may be micromanaging because you have underperforming people and you're afraid they're not going to be able to do the job, right? Or you may be micromanaging because it makes you feel comfortable, that you want to know everything everybody's doing. And either of those two things you want to fix, right?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
you don't want people who have to have a supervisor, in my view. You want people who you can set guidelines and boundaries and goals and objectives and let them go. And if they go, stay out of their way. And if they don't go, then get in their way, right?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
I'd like to add something too. I think that it's individual. Some of the volunteers that I train want to be micromanaged. They want me to tell them each step they need to do to, put together the product that we're giving away. Others want to come in and know what it looks like at the end, and they do their own steps. So I don't think there's a right or wrong way to manage people. I really think you need to know their personality and give them what they want, and really hope that those who do need extra help or micromanaging can eventually learn and not be so hands-on training and can start performing on their own. But I've had people want to be told what to do. So.
Yeah, well, thank you. I agree. I've got certain employees that just expect me to give them a daily list, and that's who they are. That's what they expect. And, so I do that. And then other ones, they, are freely to go and work on a weekly or monthly schedule. Thank you.
Any other questions right now? I'll ask another question, then give students another opportunity to ask a question. I think all of you have had some contact with public education, educators, leaders in school districts. If you could give aspiring school superintendents, CEOs of school districts, one piece of advice, one thing you would like to see happen in schools, what would that be?
I would say find teachers who are passionate about what they do and convey that passion to students. Because at the public school level, it's all about getting young adults, or or not so adults, excited about learning. It's less about what they learned, it's more about the learning process. And I don't think we value enough great teachers. I think we can do more to recognize the great teachers and then help everybody who's not great aspire to be great. Because it's all about learning is a lifelong journey, and you don't stop when you get out of high school or when you get out of college or when you get your master's degree or your PhD. You got another 30, 40, 50 years to live. And if you stop learning when you're 30 or 20 or 18, it's not going to be much fun later on.
Mhm.
Right? So to me, I think it's a big problem with colleges too. I think we value scholarship. We don't value teaching. We don't value the professors who can excite people about learning. We look at the resumes that have 1,000 scholarly articles, and we say, well, that's the best person for the job. And I don't agree with that.
Leslie, what about you? What message would you like to give aspiring school leaders?
What I've noticed over the years is that it really starts from the very top and works its way down. And I'll give an example. When I've met superintendents that are jovial, great mood, complimentary, encouraging, the person that walks in the room with a smile and everyone's happy to see, that works its way down to administration, to teachers, to students, all the way down. Now, I've also met some superintendents that are kind of bitter, maybe talking about people behind their backs, just really not happy with their job. And I've seen the administration not happy with their jobs, the teachers disgruntled, students maybe not so happy. So you really have to realize it's a very, very important role you have as a leader, as a superintendent, to set the mood of your entire school district. It comes from the top and works its way down. So just be very aware of that.
Diogo, what about you from your experiences?
Maybe this is still related to public education in Brazil, but I think public education in Brazil has become too egalitarian in the sense that you don't reward the better teachers, and you don't try to improve the teachers who are performing the worst, or even to prevent your children from being exposed to bad teachers. I think to prevent children from being exposed to bad teachers is one of the roles that the leader in education must have. Some people maybe are just not fit for that role, and they can have a very fulfilling career in other paths. So to be able to have that kind of discernment and to have the tools to actually find who are the good teachers and who are not the good teachers. I know that teachers don't like to be evaluated. I remember when the LA Times tried to publish to grade the teachers in one school district, that they were, teachers came and threw stones, and it was like a big mess. And in Brazil, sometimes this happens, but and of course, some of these methods can be unfair. It's designing good methods to evaluate teachers is of course extremely important, but it's always good to make a distinction of what works and what doesn't work in teaching, and to try to get to fix things that don't work, to reward things that do, so they can be also better seen, give more visibility to what works and to teachers who do a good job. So those kind of experiences can be shared with more people.
Great. I've got one last question before I ask it. I'll see if the students have any other questions, because this is the last opportunity. Okay, so as leaders, it can be exhausting. It can be lonely. You get the blame for things, or sometimes the credit. But as the leader, how do you each take care of yourself to stay energized, motivated, inspired, and focused? Leslie, what do you do?
Well, I think taking a break is really important. I'll give an example. After COVID last year, we had to work 4 times as hard to make 80% less funds and go through all the same obstacles everyone else did, from, not being able to ship out equipment to hospitals, to seeing our patients suffer double who are, fighting cancer and now afraid of COVID. So after working that hard and not even taking a summer vacation, my board went to me this year and said, you are taking 2 weeks off, you're unplugging, and we don't want to hear from you. We don't want to see you answering emails. You need to take time off and rebuild. And I heard them, and they were absolutely right. I was so tired. I hate to use the word burnt out. I was exhausted, and I was planning on working again during my summer vacation. I love my job. I didn't recognize that I was tired and exhausted, but I took their good advice and I just took time off. And when I came back, I felt so much better. So I really recommend you need to do whatever you need to do to rebuild.
Mm-hmm. Diogo, how do you take care of yourself?
Well, Leslie was saying how good breaks are important, and I try to procrastinate better. So sometimes, instead of just fighting procrastination, I'll put the task on hold, but when I work on something else, I'll try to structure my procrastination better. And sometimes it's just your mind telling you, focus on something else. And sometimes whatever you're focusing on can be, part of your productivity later on. It can be a different project. Make sure that you structure that well, so you don't just waste too much time. But I do think that to have just good routines, usually if depending on how my morning goes, my whole day changes with this. So to have a set time to wake up and to have a good morning routine that puts you, gets you going for the rest of your day, for me is also very important.
How do you take care of yourself?
Well, I'm better at it now that I've retired. I've learned a few tricks. The routine is important. I think there is some comfort in the routine. And I used to, I would go into the office before 7 because I wanted to be there before anybody else so that I could have my own time. And so I encouraged people not to do that. I didn't want them showing up just because I was there. And I would exercise before I went to work because I always thought that made me feel better. And to Leslie's point about taking a break, I would take breaks, but for me, I had the best breaks when I would work for an hour or 2 in the morning and then take the rest of the day off, because I wanted to, have a feeling that everything was okay. And so I couldn't bring myself to unplug for a week. And that was my weakness. I'm not saying, the moral of this story is it's personal for everybody, right? What you do to get away. But I had a better vacation if I spent a little time. So I'd organize any calls or emails between 7:30 and 9 in the morning, and then I was done. And then I would have a great time the rest of the day, and I'd probably do it again the next day. But I ended up with a great vacation because it's what I needed to do.
Good.
but not necessarily. It certainly wasn't the prescription from Leslie's board, and I don't recommend that for everybody. You know, it was just what I needed.
Great. Before we say our thank yous, Leslie, I think I see a robot in the background.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about that just real briefly, what that is as an example of what you provide kids?
So behind me is a, this way, is a telepresence robot. What this technology does is it allows children to attend school virtually, right from their hospital bed or home. We give the child an iPad or a laptop, and then we place one of these robots in their school, and they call into the robot. What's better than FaceTime, though, is they can drive the robot around. They can go from class to class.
Wow.
They can go to the cafeteria and have lunch with their friends and in real time, and just really virtually get themselves back to the school. For example, we had a child last year that missed quite a bit of school because of cancer treatment. And he missed the student so bad that when we placed a robot in his school, he drove it to the front of the hallway, right where all the students come in, and every student that walked by him entering the school, he said, hello, hello. And his friends were all, oh, we're so happy to see you. Children, if they come by robot, it's just another day in a child's life. It's nothing unusual, I guess, but it just brought him right there, and he was right back in school, like he was there. It's psychologically, it does so much for the child. It gives them control. It helps with their isolation, and it also helps so they can attend class without having tutoring. So it's not in replace of, it's a tool needed when a child's immune system is too low to attend school.
Wow.
Yeah.
How much do they cost?
When we first started buying them, they were about $6,000, and now they're coming down a little bit in price. The one behind me is $3,000.
Great.
Yeah, and we're hoping the technology just gets better and better, because there are some technical challenges, as you can imagine, with wireless and school traffic on their
Right.
Wi-Fi, and hospital traffic on their Wi-Fi.
Right.
So, but when it works brilliantly.
That's great.
Thanks for asking, Ray.
You see, Leslie, you impressed the guy who knows GE technology.
Look, and I think you're so right about the technology and the prices coming down, and the bandwidth will support in more schools, and
Yeah, 5G is coming.
yeah, that's great.
Well, thank you all so much. Thank you, students, for joining us. Thank you, Leslie Morissette, John Rice, and Diogo Costa. Thank you so much for your perspectives on leadership. This has been a fascinating hour. It's just the point that I really look forward to each time I do this in the course, to get your perspectives. And you've just inspired us all and energized us, and we appreciate your time and your involvement. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Good luck,
Thank you very much.
students.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate the information.
Good night.
Thanks. Have a good night, everyone.